The ringtone of my phone sliced through the quiet of the room. A name flashed across the screen, Dad. My heart skipped a beat. He hadn't called in weeks. Hello. My voice was steady, but I could feel the tremor in my hands as I picked up the phone. Where have you been? His voice was calm but stern. We need to talk. Family meeting tomorrow. The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Family meeting. That phrase, once a comfort, now felt like a trap. My name is Aloan, and I'm 28. I could hear the silence on the other end, the kind that always followed my absence. That silence had been growing between us for years. Why now, though? Why was he calling after all this time? After everything I'd done to stay away from them? The wedding, the ceremony they refused to attend, the life I built in silence. All of it seemed to have been forgotten until one thing caught their eye. The Porsche. I hadn't shared anything with them. Not about the wedding. Not about the changes in my life. But they saw it, didn't they? They saw my post on Facebook, the one with the sleek, black Porsche parked outside my apartment. I didn't need to check my notifications to know. How funny it was that the first time they noticed me was not on the most important day of my life, but when the material world had a hold on their attention. And now, Dad was calling, pretending like this was a family issue. What did they want now? I let out a slow breath, trying to keep the anger from bubbling over. I wasn't a little girl anymore. This time, when I showed up, there'd be no apology, only a surprise. The next day, I sat in my car outside the house I had once called home. The place looked the same, the whitewashed brick, the faded shutters, the crooked mailbox that had always made me laugh. And yet, something felt different now. I wasn't the same person who left this house years ago, and they weren't the same family I grew up with. I hadn't stepped foot in this place since my wedding day, the wedding they refused to attend. My wedding, a day I'd spent years dreaming of, only to have it ignored by the people who should have been there, cheering me on. I checked the time. It was almost noon. The meeting was supposed to start at 12:30, but I didn't move from the car. The fear, the bitterness, and the anger churned inside me, but I had learned long ago to mask it. I had spent too many years being ignored, belittled, treated like I was invisible to make this moment anything less than perfect. I stepped out of the car, letting the sound of my heels on the driveway echo in the air, and walked to the front door. The porch, with its rocking chairs, felt more like a scene from someone else's life than mine. I knocked twice. The door swung open, and there he was, my father. He looked older, his face more lined than I remembered. But there was something in his eyes now. Guilt? Regret? He didn't say a word at first. Just stared. I didn't give him the chance to speak. I'm here, I said, my voice steady. Let's talk. The silence between us thickened, stretching out longer than I had anticipated. He looked at me as though trying to find the words, but there was no script, no rehearsal for this moment. His eyes flicked to my hands, where the slight shimmer of my engagement ring caught the light, the same one I had worn in the photos he never bothered to see. Come inside, he finally muttered, stepping back from the door, motioning for me to enter. I hesitated for a second before walking through the threshold, each step feeling like a small betrayal of the life I had built outside these walls. The living room smelled faintly of old wood and stale memories. I saw my mother's favorite chair, the one she'd always sat in when she'd pretend to listen to my day at school. My chest tightened, the floodgates of old resentment ready to burst open. But I swallowed it down. This wasn't about the past anymore. I took a seat on the couch, but my eyes didn't wander to the family photos lining the walls. There was no comfort here for me anymore, just a ghost of the love that had once been. My father sat opposite me, clearing his throat, his hands wringing together nervously. He wasn't the same man who'd towered over me when I was younger, full of authority. He looked small, broken even. So, you've made quite a name for yourself, huh? He said, his voice thick with something I couldn't place. I met his gaze, squarely. It's not about the name, Dad. It's about respect. Something you never gave me. His face tightened at my words. The air felt heavier now. It was clear that this conversation wasn't going to be easy for either of us. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, eyes darting to the photos on the walls, like they were a refuge. It wasn't just the wedding he hadn't attended. It was everything before that. The years of quiet neglect, the subtle jabs, the dismissive tone whenever I reached for something more. I had learned over time that my worth was measured only by my proximity to their idea of success. "I didn't know you'd make it this far," he said finally, his voice softer now, almost apologetic. "But the car—" I could feel the weight of his eyes on me, his words hanging in the air like smoke. He was still thinking about the Porsche. That was all this was about, the car. Not the wedding, not the years of absence, but the symbol of success. It wasn't enough that I had proven myself in every way they had ignored. I had to have something flashy to finally be seen. "Is that all you care about?" I asked, the question slipping from my lips before I could stop it. He hesitated, then nodded, his fingers tapping the arm of the chair. "It's not just a car, Lowen. It's a symbol. You're telling the world you've made it. And—" "Don't," I cut him off. "I don't need your approval. I never have." The words came out more bitter than I expected, more final. His face shifted, his brow furrowing as he processed my response. There was no apology, no understanding, only confusion. I sat back, letting the tension settle. The conversation was no longer about the car, the wedding, or even the years of neglect. It was about something deeper, the realization that I would never get what I truly wanted from them. I wasn't looking for their love anymore. I was looking for something else, entirely. The silence stretched between us like a chasm, and in that moment, I realized how far we had drifted. My father had always seen me through the lens of what I could give him, what I could show him that would make him proud. But I was no longer interested in earning his pride. I had spent years craving something that couldn't be given, and now I was done. "I thought you'd be happy for me," I said, quietly, breaking the stillness. The words felt foreign, like I had spoken them to a different version of myself. The old Aloan, the one who still longed for their validation. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes softening, but it wasn't enough. Not anymore. "I am happy for you, Aloan," he said, but there was a hesitation in his voice, something that didn't quite reach his eyes. "But you didn't even invite us to the wedding. We should have been there." I felt a sharp pang in my chest, but it wasn't the kind of hurt I'd once felt. It was more like the sting of an old wound being opened again. They wanted me to feel guilty for not begging them to come to my wedding, for not needing them there, for not needing them at all. "I didn't invite you," I said, my voice steady, "because you didn't deserve to be there. You didn't care when it mattered." The truth was out now, and I felt it settling into the room like a heavy fog. I wasn't angry anymore, not in the way I had been before. This was different. This was clarity. His expression faltered, but instead of an apology, he just nodded slowly. "I see. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was all I was going to get." I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, but it didn't hold the same power it once had. He used to be the man I feared, the one whose approval I craved like air, the one whose disappointment could break me. But today his gaze felt hollow, like a fading echo of something that had never really been there. "I just don't understand why you've pulled away," he said, his voice quieter now. "You used to be so close to us. What happened?" The question hung there, but I didn't answer immediately. How could I? What could I say that would even begin to explain the years of quiet betrayal? The subtle ways they made me feel small, like I was never enough. The way they made me believe that my worth was only tied to what I could give, what I could achieve, what I could show off. "I grew up," I said finally, my voice a little too steady, a little too calm. "I learned that I didn't need your approval to be happy. I learned that I didn't need you to validate my choices. I built a life on my own terms, and you never even saw it." He shifted in his seat, his hands fidgeting with the fabric of his pants. There was guilt there, I could see it. But there was also something else, pride. He didn't want to admit that he had failed me, failed all of us, by not seeing me for who I was. He was too proud to acknowledge the truth, too stubborn to understand that I had stopped waiting for him to catch up with me. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said, his voice cracking slightly, like he was on the edge of something. "You already did," I replied, the words slipping out before I could stop them. "But you can't fix that now, Dad. Not with words. Not with a meeting or a phone call. Not even with a Porsche in my driveway." He looked at me then, his expression unreadable. For a moment, I thought he might finally say something that would make a difference. But he didn't. He just sat there, lost in thought, the distance between us growing wider with each passing second. I had stopped waiting for him to reach me. Now the only thing I wanted was to walk away, not to escape, but to finally be free, to live my life on my own terms, without the weight of their expectations holding me down. The room felt colder now, despite the warmth of the afternoon sun seeping through the windows. My father's silence pressed on me, thick and suffocating, but it wasn't just the lack of words that made the air feel heavy. It was the weight of everything that had been left unsaid for so long, all the years of unspoken judgments and unacknowledged pain. I could feel the past winding its way around us, a chain that had bound me to this place far longer than I had ever wanted. "You know," I said, breaking the silence, "I used to think that one day you'd understand, that maybe if I showed you how hard I worked, how much I had accomplished, you'd finally see me. You'd finally see me, not just what I could do for you." My voice cracked slightly, the years of frustration coming to the surface. His eyes met mine, but there was something in them that wasn't there before. A flicker of regret? Or perhaps something else. Was it guilt? I couldn't tell anymore. "Is that what this is about?" he asked softly, his voice full of confusion. "You think I never saw you?" "No, Dad." I shook my head, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "You never saw me. Not really. Not until you saw the car. Until you saw the success that came with it. The symbol of what you always wanted me to be. Only then did you care enough to pick up the phone. That's what hurts the most." His face paled, and I could see the shift in his expression, a realization that had taken years to reach. But it wasn't enough. It was too little, too late. The hurt was already ingrained in me, carved too deeply to erase with a few words. "I don't need your approval anymore," I said, the calmness in my voice now almost chilling. "I never needed it. Not really. I made it without you, without any of you. And that's the truth you can't swallow." I stood up, my body suddenly heavy with everything I had carried inside me for so long. There was no more room for hope, no more space for the little girl who had wanted her father to be proud. The woman standing in front of him now didn't need that. "I'm not asking for anything from you," I said, taking a step toward the door. "Not anymore. And you don't get to have a say in the life I've built." I walked out, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was something lighter about it now, something free. The door closed softly behind me, but the weight of what had just happened didn't immediately settle. I stood on the porch, feeling the cool breeze against my skin, and for a moment I didn't know where to go or what to do. I had expected to feel relief, to feel like the weight of the years had finally lifted off my shoulders, but instead there was something else, a strange emptiness. I had spent so much time waiting for them to change, for them to see me, to understand, and now that it was all over, it didn't feel like the victory I thought it would. Maybe I had expected some kind of grand closure, a moment where everything clicked into place, where my father would finally say the words I'd been dying to hear. But none of that happened, and perhaps that was the point. I didn't need them to change. I didn't need them to validate me. I had spent years trying to fit into their mold, trying to be the daughter they wanted me to be. But today I realized that I was no longer that person. I was a Lowen, and I had made my peace with who I was, who I had become. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keys to my Porsche. The sleek, black car parked in front of me seemed like a symbol of everything I had fought for, everything I had achieved on my own. But it wasn't just about the car. It was about the journey I had taken to get here. The sacrifices, the heartache, the moments of doubt, they had all led to this moment. This quiet, definitive step away from the past. I took a deep breath and looked around. The house was still there, the place where I had grown up, the place where my past had been built. But that house no longer held me. It no longer defined me. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I didn't need to check it to know who it was. I could feel my father's call, his desperate need for something he could never give me. Peace, understanding, love. But I had already found that in myself. In the freedom of walking away, in the strength of knowing I no longer needed their approval to be whole. I got into my car and started the engine. The roar of the engine was louder than the voices in my head, louder than the ghost of my past. I shifted into gear, my hand steady on the wheel, and I drove away. There would be no more family meetings, no more pretending that the past could be fixed. There was only the road ahead, a road I had chosen on my own, without their approval, without their presence. And as I drove away, I realized that for the first time in my life, I felt complete. The journey of Elohim shows us that true strength doesn't come from seeking validation or waiting for approval. It's about finding peace within ourselves, owning our choices, and having the courage to walk away from the things that no longer serve us. Sometimes the hardest part isn't leaving. It's realizing you don't need anyone's permission to be who you are. If you've ever felt unseen, unheard, or undervalued by the people who should have lifted you up, know this: you are not alone. Your story is yours to own, and the power to change your narrative is always in your hands. If this story resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let me know how you've taken control of your own life. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories of strength, growth, and real-life inspiration. Your journey matters, and it's only just beginning.